One of the big questions you should have about your reserve fund is it enough? Every year, you should have a clear understanding of your reserve fund strength. Think of it as the starting point for any funding plan. Fortunately, National Reserve Study Standards provide a standard calculation that should appear in every reserve study, so you can see how your reserve fund compares in size to how much your association needs. But what is this standard calculation? And does it provide reliable guidance for your association? The good news is that not only does this calculation work, it has an extra benefit. It also reveals your upcoming special assessment risk. Follow along and see for yourself. So now let's turn to the next topic, calculating reserve fund strength. I want to encourage you to think that it's not just looking at the cash in the bank that appears on your bank statement or balance sheet, but I want to help you gain meaning about if what you have is relatively a lot or a little. Can you call it strong or is it weak? And that's because you can look at pictures like this and you realize, it's not just a condominium association. At this association, it's a complex array of so many different projects. In this picture, you can see at the top the roofing projects. Then, of course, you can see the painting. You can see caring for the central courtyard, which involves resurfacing the pool, painting and replacing that nice trellis, caring for the balconies. And that's just what you see in this picture. You're not seeing the hallways, the elevators, the flat roofs behind the tile roof portions. If you're a board member, a manager, or a homeowner at this association, you know that these projects are ahead. This is, I think when I took this picture, it was about 2 years old. So there's a lot in the future that they're going to need to prepare for. How you manage your finances will determine your journey, if it's going to be smooth or bumpy. And by bumpy, I mean full of special assessments, some deferred maintenance, or perhaps some steep assessment increases. So let's start out this journey to the future by helping you understand where you are as a starting point. Always a good idea. Now, how can you get comfortable knowing that there is a definite answer to the question about your reserve fund strength? That's an important thing for you to understand as association leaders, whether you're a manager or a board member, because it's important for you to be able to communicate this to your homeowners. Now, it starts with a reserve component list, outlining the projects that you expect to happen at the association. Here's a simplified list. You see the description of the projects. UL is the useful life column. Remaining useful life is RUL. And the current cost is off to the right. Pretty simple, and we're going to use this a number of times as we go through today's program. And this should be a pretty solid list at your association, hopefully assembled based on National Reserve Study Standards and its 3-part test that you see here. And if you're not familiar with this concept, again, I recommend you catch up and watch our Reserve Studies 101 webinar. And I'll make sure there's a link to that program in the outline. So, how much cash and reserves at your association would or should make you feel good? And again, just like that 3-part test, National Reserve Study Standards step in with a solution. And that solution gives us a reliable measuring system that works for all types of associations. It's not a straight dollars per unit or percent of unit value or a straight cash number. It's a calculation that compares your current reserve fund balance to your association's needs, telling you how well the reserve funds fit the needs of the association. And let me illustrate. Let's start with a few simple examples. The first one is that first component from the sample component list I showed a moment ago, the pool furniture replacement. It has a 5-year useful life, a remaining useful life of 0, meaning it's time to be replaced now, and its current replacement cost is $4,600. If you were a board member needing to buy a new set of pool furniture, how much would you like to see in reserves ready to be spent at this time? So think for a moment. And if you're thinking like most people, you're thinking, I want to buy $4,600 worth of pool furniture, I'd like to have $4,600. So yes, when the remaining useful life is 0, you want the money. You want to have it all available. So you should have at least that much in reserves. And let's do it again. Now let's talk about the pool resurfacing. This is a project that needs to be done about every 10 years. and it has 5 years of remaining useful life, so it's about halfway used up. You don't need $10,000 now because the cost is, or the expense is actually still a few years away. But you have a current cost estimate of $10,000, so it's halfway used up. What do you think would be a good reserve balance for this component? Okay, again, you probably guessed correctly. With a life halfway used up, you ideally should have half the funds set aside. $5,000 is a good amount for the association to have set aside for the pool resurfacing now that it's halfway used up. So I'm going to do this in a little different way now. Rather than showing you numbers, I'm going to do it graphically. And eliminating interest and inflation for simplicity, let me walk you through what we've been talking about, that pool resurface project. New association here, how much should you have in reserves? Well, at 5 years, it'd be logical to have $5,000 set aside. Then as you step forward through the years, it'd be nice to gradually have more and more and more until in that 10th year, you have the $10,000. And that's just the right amount to have set aside for the pool resurfacing, right? So that's the idea of what we're trying to accomplish here. Now, after you do the pool resurfacing, in the next year, you don't want or need $10,000 in the next year. You just need 1 year's worth of deterioration set aside because you've got another 10 years till the project happens again. So in the last few charts, I showed that the reserve needs at your association go up and down over the years depending on the timing of your reserve projects. Your needs are not the total cost of your reserve components. Now, of course, due to inflation, your reserve needs will generally trend upwards, but I want to make the point here that your reserve needs go up as you're anticipating a large project, and they go down after you've accomplished the large project. So your reserve needs go up and down through the years. And doing what we've talked about is actually a pretty simple calculation. It's an equation done by your reserve study provider in the reserve study. And it's literally the fractional age of the component times the current cost. The total cost of all those individual calculations is called the fully funded balance. And let me show you what that looks like. If you take that reserve component list that I showed a moment ago and you add another column over at the right, we'll call that the fully funded balance column. That's a calculation of the current needs of the association. We talked about the pool furniture needing $4,600, the pool resurface being at $5,000, and you can see what's going on here. Another easy one to see will be building repaint. Remaining useful life of 1 year, so it's 90% used up. 90% of $50,000 is $45,000. So you keep doing that same calculation, and you end up with the number of $154,100 off on the right. That's the amount of money that would be nice to have at your association. It's a good target point. We call that the fully funded balance. Okay, now let's talk about what that looks like for gaining some meaning out of that. And let's think about the seesaw. You have the association on one side and cash on the other side. And let's try to learn from that comparison. Okay, when you compare the reserve balance to the fully funded balance, your actual reserve cash to your fully funded balance, all of a sudden you get a very interesting number, and that's called the percent funded. And that's a calculation, again, done in your reserve study, and that's going to reveal some very interesting things. Now, let's do it for a few sample associations. Same association here, $154,100 fully funded balance. If you have $308,000 on hand, you're going to be 200% funded. If you have only $77,000 in reserves, you have about 50% of that fully funded balance. And that starts to give you an idea of if you have a lot or a little compared to the needs of your association. But still, what does more or less or a lot or a little really mean? What are the implications? Now we're getting to some good stuff. This is how you can learn if your reserves are strong, fair, or weak. It's all about percent funded. And that's a strong indicator of special assessment risk. Do you have enough to do your reserve projects or not? That's fundamentally what you want to know. And that's fundamentally what percent funded tells you. It's a powerful risk indicator. Just like with your own health, you care about things like your weight, your cholesterol, your blood pressure. Over at the left-hand side of the chart, when your percent funded is low, in the 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, in the 0 to 30% range, you have about a 40 or 50% chance of a special assessment in any given year if you want to try to accomplish your projects, meaning you have a high risk of special assessment. And on the other hand, if you're at 70% funded or above, special assessments are rare. That means associations above 70% funded regularly have enough reserves to do their projects on time. Those boards feel comfortable that their reserves are strong. So, where does your association fit? And again, percent funded should be a number calculated and reported in your reserve study. Now, like a grade in school, it's nice to be near 100%, but unlike school, a score of 75% is still pretty good. Remember, 70 and above is strong. So do your homework, find out where your percent funded puts you in the 0 to 30% weak range, in the 30 to 70% fair range, or in the above 70% strong range. It's not about your cash balance. It's about fit, the amount of cash your association has compared to its needs. And that's important not only for the board and the homeowners, but knowing reserve fund strength also helps a manager understand the pressures an association is going to be feeling, the financial pressures. And it's also going to help outside parties like real estate agents and bankers learn if the association is well prepared for its own future, or if a new owner is likely going to be facing a special assessment. And in answer to the original profile question, this is the national profile of reserve fund strength. Many people are surprised to see how many associations are in the fair or strong range. You can see that out of all associations, the peak of the curve is bending over in the fair and strong range. There's a lot of associations that are doing arguably pretty well. Most people are surprised because they're thinking that every association has weak reserves, and that's not true. The truth is that about 30% of associations, a little under 10%, a little over 10%, a little more over 10%, about 30% of associations have weak reserves, about 40% have fair reserves, and another 30% have strong reserves where special assessments are rare. The point I'll make in this next section of the webinar is now that you know where your association stands, you can create a multi-year plan to improve your association's future. At Association Reserves, we make the present less stressful and the future more secure. If you want to join us in this mission, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment down below on what you'd like to see us address in a future video. Let's plan for your best future.